All right, so here we have some ideas of different designs, just a few ideas of different designs possibilities. So I could do something like this where I'm just rolling up a ball of clay, and then I would, when I place that in, I would probably push it down a little bit so it would be approximately the same width as my pinky finger, or a little bit smaller than my pinky finger, okay? But it would be more like a coin shape, okay, when completed. Second one I have here is like making the base layer. It's just a mini base, so it's smaller version, okay? These two things were just made by using a little piece of coil and then rolling it. These two were made by slab construction. So I did a triangle, still approximate thickness of my finger, and again, this one, same thing, approximately the size of my fingertip, maybe a little smaller, which is okay. So I have a square and a triangle, okay? The square and the triangle were made by flattening out a piece of clay. And so the key word to think of with a slab is flat, but I want to make sure it's still the correct thickness. So then what I did is, if I wanted to keep my next one the same size, I would trim around that using a fettling knife. And a fettling knife is a clay knife. It's just a dull, no serrated blade, okay, so there's no sharp edge onto it, but it's thin and it gives you a nice way to cut a straight edge, okay? So if I cut that, then I have two that are exactly the same size, and in this case exact same thickness as well, okay? So those are just a few examples of designs. I can also use a coil for a design, and how I would use a coil for a design is I could either just use a straight row and circle it around, or I could do kind of like a zigzag coil and do a design like that. Okay, so there's a lot of possibilities, but this just gives you a few ideas of how you could start. Okay, so today I'm ready to start my first layer around, my first decorative layer around my base, my center point, okay? So I'm gonna decide on a pattern to do, and for my first pattern, my first circle layer, I'm going to do a row of polka dots. I want to have my ball of clay, and I just pushed it a little bit to make it kind of like a flatter coin, still round, still circular, but just a coin shape instead, okay? And I'm going to start my point in the center, my base layer is my radius point in the center, like your radial design. I'm going to be working off of that point, okay, in a circular pattern and around, okay? So each time I make a new or another design to add around my radius point, I'm going to kind of just make sure that they're approximately the same size. So I like to keep one out as a measuring piece while I'm putting the others in, okay? So I build one and then put it in. I build one, put it in right away, and I compare those to my extra one around the edge that I left off on the side, so that I can make sure I don't have one that's like way too big or one that's way too small, okay? I want them to all approximately be the same size. And notice how I'm just placing them in. I didn't do any blending. The reason I don't do any blending is because if I need to modify the size of one afterwards, like take a little bit off just to squeeze that last design in, then I have the flexibility to do that, okay? So that it can fit in perfectly into that circle, all right? So now here I have like my first layer, my first row of designs done. So my first row is circles. Once I have my first row done, I'm going to blend that row very, very gently, not pressing very hard, but yet hard enough that you can see I'm physically moving that clay around. And I like to take some of the clay from the center coil that I made yesterday, and I like to smush that clay onto my newly made pieces. So I'm going to squish it side to side, but I also have to join these coil pieces that I made too. Let's say I feel like I have to move my clay too much and there's like maybe a hole that I'd like to cover up a little bit. My clay should be wet enough that I can still add another little piece of clay into that area. So here's another one, like I may want to plug that hole a little bit, so I'm just going to add a little piece of wet clay to it, blend it in so that the bottom is nice and smooth, because remember this is where our food will go, on the inside side of our bowl, so we want that to be extra smooth. Okay, so that's one layer, and I'm going to recenter that. Okay, so now I have one layer done. Now I have to have 3 total layers of different designs. I could have more than 3 layers, but I have to at least have enough room for 3 different designs, so to build onto this.